arms alongside their grandchildren. They fight for their people in the knowledge that if they fail, they will be destroyed utterly. There is no Geneva Convention, no international law, no rules of war. The Kurds of Kobani, Rojava and the Kurdistan region, including Yazidis, Christians and other minorities, are on the front line of the fight against the vilest fascism of our age. History teaches us that when you are confronted by a monstrous evil, you have to take it on. You have to fight for your rights, for your life. Kurdish people live in Turkey, Iraq, Iran and Syria. And across the world, Kurds live in Germany, UK, US and across Europe. But we have no country of our own. One of our great national leaders is Abdullah Öcalan. Abdullah Öcalan has been in a Turkish prison since 1999. He was abducted and imprisoned. Amnesty International has warned that his treatment is cruel, degrading and inhumane. The European Court of Human Rights has stated he did not get a fair trial. He has been held in solitary confinement. He has been denied visits from his lawyers and his family for years. And this, comrades, is a disgrace. It must not stand. Öcalan is the Kurdish Nelson Mandela. He has called for a peaceful settlement of the Kurdish question. His political vision is what inspires so many of the fighters who are battling against the death cult ISIS. A vision of a democratic, pluralist nation with human rights for all versus a nightmare of repression, rape and return to medievalism. Like Nelson Mandela, Öcalan wants to lead his people to a nation which is democratic, pluralistic, and where women and minorities have equal rights and status. For many years, he was incarcerated in an island prison in the Sea of Marmara as the only prisoner. For 10 years, he was held in this way, cut off from his fellows, and only his guards as company. Even on Robben Island, Nelson Mandela could converse with other ANC leaders. On Imrali Island, Öcalan was isolated. Like Nelson Mandela, Öcalan has been incarcerated because he is fighting for national liberation. Like Mandela, he is behind bars because of what he thinks, what he represents. Like Mandela, Öcalan is integral to a peaceful creation of a new nation. And like Mandela, Öcalan must be freed. So today, in the spirit of solidarity that this miners' gala symbolizes, I am asking for your help. Already, so many trade unions have signed up to our Trade Union Freedom for Öcalan campaign. GMB, Unite, FPU, ASDO, NEU and UT, Prospect, GFTU, RMT, TSSA, ASLEV, CWU, EIS. We are supported by the TUC and by the trade union solicitors Thompson's. But we will not rest until every trade union is affiliated to our campaign. One of the greatest supporters of the Kurdish people is also here today. He has stood shoulder to shoulder with the Kurdish struggle for 3 decades. His name is Jeremy Corbyn. Thank you, Jeremy, for your continued support and solidarity. So friends, I want you to be like Jeremy. I want you to sign up to our Freedom for Öcalan campaign, to put pressure on the authoritarian government in Turkey, which is committing crimes against the Kurdish community every day. The Turkish government, led by Erdogan, is imprisoning dissidents and political opponents and muzzling the free press. Over 50,000 people have been locked up for disagreeing with the government. Erdogan is trying to smash the Kurdish movement in Turkey, locking up Kurdish councillors, mayors, trade unionists and MPs. So I say to you, please invite speakers from the campaign to your branches and conferences. Please write letters to newspapers, to your local MPs. Please use online media. Please affiliate your branches. Please do whatever you can. In the future, I want you to be proud of the role you played in supporting the Kurds, in helping us to build a proud, democratic country with a strong society rooted in human rights, freedom of expression and the rule of law. I want you to be proud to help free Abdullah Öcalan from his prison cell, to enable him to help build a new democratic society, to show what wonderful spirit of internationalism and humanity and solidarity that the Durham miners always showed and the British trade union movement is built upon. We need practical support that this mighty union has shown in support of the struggles against apartheid in South Africa, and in support of the Palestinians in their struggle for statehood, and in support of workers across the globe from Cuba to Caracas. Remember that our politics is about fighting for a better world, where peoples live freely in peace, where the treasures of the earth are shared fairly, and where all our children grow tall, not just here at home, but all across the globe. The big meeting is not just big because of the number of people. It is big because of its big values, its big vision, and its big heart. Thank you very much. Solidarity.
It just gets better, doesn't it? Right. Next speaker, and I want to thank Ibrahim. That's a cause we can all get behind. I'd like to introduce to you a man who has promoted many causes. Ian Lavery. I knew him when he was just a lad. He's been marching into the Durham Gala for years, and now he's going to tell us how the values of the Gala can be brought into a Labour government. Fantastic. Ian Lavery.
Well, comrades, I'm absolutely delighted to be here. It's an honour, and it's a privilege, as always, to be here at the Durham Miners Gala. And thanks to Alan and Joe and the whole team, everyone who's played their part in making this once again a fantastic event. It's being named today as one of the best events in the world, and listen, I fully agree with those sentiments. And long may the Durham Miners Gala continue. You know, the Durham Miners Gala espouses everything that the labour and trade union movement together have fought for generations. And in government, the Labour Party will listen and will ensure in government that the views espoused here will be taken with us into Downing Street. I was delighted to see a message from Bernie Sanders, a hero of mine. But you know, he mentioned the coal industry. Well, I disagree with him, because I'll fight till my dying day to bring the coal industry back to the UK and burning coal cleanly with investment into clean coal technology. That's why we're here, by the way, and we should never ever forget our roots. I realise that Jeremy is looking at me as I've said that. It's not in line with Labour Party policy. Yet. But comrades, listen. I first spoke at the Durham Miners Gala in 2003, in the Blair years. It was in the Blair years. And to be honest, we had a great turnout. The speakers were fantastic. But I wasn't any who was believed at that time that only 15 years on we'll be standing here with 250,000 plus people at the Durham Miners Gala, with the Labour Party being under new management of Jeremy Corbyn. Comrades, it's under new management. We're heading in a different direction, and we're looking for equality. We're looking for opportunity. We're giving hope to those who have missed out for years and years and years. Many people totally disenfranchised with the political system, and understandable why. And we want to ensure that we can encourage people back into politics, not as an item of tokenism, but we want to know what people want in this lifetime. We want to listen to people and not just talk down to people. And that's why the people will be empowered under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party. Comrade, we live in austerity Britain. This country's on its bloody knees. The top 5% of people in this country own 40% of the wealth. We've got to challenge that. We live in Food Bank Britain. The Trussell Trust has only said this week that they'll need to produce another 2,200 tonnes of food for the next year. We've got 500,000 kids used emergency food banks in the last year. The usage has trebled. Since since the records began in 1961, we've seen the highest rates of child poverty. And it's set to increase by another 1 million by 2022. You know, this is 2018. And we're not looking after our own kids. What does that say for a society? Exactly.
Get the Tories out!
Absolutely appalling, comrades. We've got the public services on its knees. Absolutely on its knees. We've been talking about the NHS. The NHS is only still operating due to the commitment of the doctors and nurses, the porters, everyone else who works in that fantastic service. Because without their commitment and dedication and passion, it would be not on its knees, it would be finished for good. And we cannot allow that to happen. And what about the police force? We've lost 21,000 police off the front line. Crime's up on average 14%. People are saying, well, why is crime up? If you take the police away, it's not surprising that we'll see crime figures increase. And what about the fantastic members of the fire and rescue services who suffered cut after cut after cut after cut, but they still run into the likes of Grenfell when other people are trying to get out. And from this Gala today, we want to send a message to Matt and his fantastic team. We're behind you, comrades. We're behind you. We want to not remember the failing education service and stop criticising and scapegoating the fantastic teachers in this country who are working under the most unimaginable stress levels. And of course we shouldn't ever forget the fantastic local government workers as well. Many of these people are very low paid in terms of their monthly income. You know, in this country there's 3 million people working in precarious and insecure employment. Basically, that means that people are going to work for naught. 0-hour contracts. This area is the black spot of the country for 0-hour contracts, but the media, the press, the BBC, whoever, continually tell us that we've got better employment rates now than we've ever had. It's because people are making nothing a week. And I can speak about 0-hour contracts for quite some time. You know the script. We've got 1.9 million pensioners in poverty. We've got 1 million pensioners in fuel poverty. And we've got, in this region again, we've got a life expectancy of 15 years less than those people in the sunnier parts of southern England. That cannot be bloody tolerated. Why should that be the case? And Can I mention this? These are political choices. These are choices made by politicians. We're not a country, a poor third world country. We're a country with lots of wealth, plenty of wealth. It's the way we distribute that wealth. And let me tell you, the wealth will be distributed on a much more equal basis once Jeremy is in number 2. You know what the laughing stock, comrades? We're the laughing stock, not just of this country, we're the laughing stock of Europe, we're the laughing stock of the world. Boris Johnson, he's been described as a buffoon. I would love to give you my description of Boris Johnson, but I'm not allowed. Is there anybody here really thinks that Jacob Rees-Mogg should be the next Prime Minister? For heaven's sake, what's it come to? Who wants to ride in his Bentley? Anybody here? Anyway, comrades, we've got a Prime Minister leading the country without authority, without any respect whatsoever, without any power whatsoever. And wasn't it absolutely dreadful to see her hand in hand again for the second time with that clown, that cretin, Donald Trump? Comrades, we need an election, and we need an election soon. We only missed out by a hair's breadth in 2017, despite the pundits telling us that the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn would be annihilated. We only missed out by that much. It's not a pipe dream. Sorry, it isn't a pipe dream now, it's reality. You know, only missed out by a very short space, 3 percentage points. That's all it was. 3 percentage points, despite the fact that we were to be annihilated. The Labour Party have promised, and let me say will deliver, to transform the lives of thousands, millions of people in this country. We want the keys to Downing Street, and that's the only way we can change people's lives. We want to take in a government, we want to embody the fantastic, great values and principles of this gathering. We will also ensure, it's in the manifesto for the second time, that we will seek for an equal distribution, a much more fairer distribution of the mine workers' pension scheme for miners and the families. Comrades, only this week, the last actuarial valuation has meant that the government will get nearly another $1 billion out of the arse pockets of miners and their families. It's absolutely disgraceful, and it's theft of the highest order in anybody's books. We'll also, comrades, look towards following in the steps of the Labour Party in Scotland when they've secured in Holyrood a review into the policing of the miners' strike. And I'll tell you something, I support the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign immensely. And well done to them, well done to everybody. But there's comrades here who were involved in the miners' strike up and down this country, got battered by the police on a daily basis. We want a review into the policing of the miners' strike and the whole of the country. And we want people brought to justice. Comrades, we'll deliver on the pledges set out in the manifesto. And I think the fact that the manifesto spelled out very clearly our move towards nationalisation, renationalisation of the trains, of the water system, and of the Royal Mail. And let's just say, if it's got anything at all to do with me, that's not the finished, complete list. Because you can't control what you don't own, comrades. We want to replace despair with hope, optimism, equality, ambition. This isn't a utopian pipe dream. We're nearly there, we really are, you know. We really are nearly there. Comrades, I promise you, I really promise you with all my heart that this is our time. This is our revolution. We need to seize the day and seize the opportunity. We need to demand an early election, a victory, and Jeremy Corbyn Prime Minister, leading for the many and not the few. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank Ian for keeping it short. We look forward to seeing all that in place. Right, now from a lad to a lass, it's the first time she's spoken at the Gala, so give her a warm Durham welcome. Cheddar Foreign Secretary, Emily Thornberry.
My comrades, my brothers, my sisters, this is one of the greatest honours of my life. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I don't know if a photo of me younger is up on the screen. Is it up there? There was one of me and my mum. I don't know if you've seen it. My only regret is that my mum didn't live to see her daughter addressing this magnificent crowd and being at the big meeting. And yesterday I had the very great pleasure of telling the media when they asked me if either me or Jeremy were available to see Donald Trump, and I had to say to them I was afraid that that we were sorry, but we had somewhere far better to go and people who were far more important to meet. But I'd like to thank you as a movement for not just for inviting me here today, but for the lesson that you taught me right at the start of my career back in 1985. I was starting out as a barrister and I was sent up from London to represent local miners in the strike, and they were being criminalised by the system. They had been arrested on trumped-up charges for breaching the peace or obstruction, and it was the first job I always had to do before even fighting the charges was sorting out bail, because they were constantly asking for conditions of bail of these local leaders that they should be banned from even attending the meetings, the protests and the pickets that they were supposed to be leading. And the Thatcher government, as we know, was trying to do everything that it could to kill the organisation of the strike, to destroy the will and unity of mining communities. And they were prepared to use the police and they were prepared to abuse the court system in order to do so. And after those long days and weeks in court, after fighting such injustice, what has been burned on my brain is that the miners that I was representing and their families would never let me just go home. They said I had to go back with them to the Miners' Welfare Hall and share with them what they had that night for tea, even though they were short of food themselves. And I saw on those evenings communities living in hunger and poverty, communities being attacked by the state, and communities having to fight for their very survival. But nevertheless, those communities sticking together, being prepared to share what little they had, even with a stranger like me. And I tell you, comrades, as a student, I'd read about socialism, I'd talked about socialism, I'd read about solidarity, I thought I understood it. But it was only when I saw those mining communities and saw solidarity and socialism in action that I finally understood. And that was a lesson that I learned back then, and it's a lesson that I see again today, and examples of it I see again today. Tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people, young and old, proud of their heritage, proud of the struggles they faced together, and above all, proud of their communities. And I am so proud to be here with you. And I'm also honoured to be at the first Durham Miners Gala with an all-woman banner group. It was set up to celebrate 100 years of 8.4 million women having won the right to vote, where working class women had another 10 years to wait. And last March I met and talked to Laura Daly and Lynn Gibson, and some of the people organising the banner. And they told me about their plans, and it was so great to see that banner marching past us today, and the fruits of their labours at last. But what was so brilliant, you know, was hearing about how when the message was sent out and people were asked, the hundreds of members of the group were asked to nominate women who'd inspired them to be then those who should be commemorated on the banners, their heroines from the past 100 years. People didn't just nominate great figures of the suffragette movement or famous female politicians or trade unionists. People also nominated their mums, and they nominated their nans, and they nominated the nurses from the local hospitals, and they nominated teachers from local schools. And they nominated women like Myrtle Macpherson, Heather Wood's mum. And she set up the community centres who fed the miners and their families in Easington. Now Myrtle is not with us today because she's not well. And this is the first gala that she has missed for 75 years. Myrtle, this afternoon, 250,000 people say, "Get well soon, we miss you." And many of the real heroines of our movement too often will never have their names in history. We know that. And when we think about those women who've gone before us and inspired us over those past 100 years, some of whom have changed the country and some of them have changed our lives, we know that we owe them all a huge debt. And we can't just pay that back just by thanking them, or putting up statues for them outside Parliament, or even celebrating them in that beautiful banner from the all-women group that we've seen today. No, comrades. The best way to pay back the debt that we owe to those women is to get out there and fight like they did. Fight for our rights, fight for our freedoms, fight for our families, fight for our communities, and never stop fighting until we have true equality and fairness in this country, between men and women, between rich and poor, between north and south. And all of that fight that lies in front of us, of all the injustices and scandals we must take on, modern slavery, zero-hours contract, children growing up in poverty, pensioners growing old with no social care, our NHS and schools creaking at the seams because of Tory austerity. We all know that alongside all those fights, there is one burning injustice for the families and communities here today, and that it is, we have to end for once and all the government's robbery of the miners' pension scheme. The money in that scheme belongs to the miners, and the surplus from that scheme belongs to the miners. And we need a deal that will give it back to the miners. Because, comrades, as I saw 30 years ago when working on those strike cases, and I saw 4 months ago speaking to the all-women banner group, and as I see today with this magnificent crowd, this is a movement that is not just about men working down the mines, but it is also about the strong and extraordinary women who supported them. Those extraordinary women, the children they bore, the families they raised, and the communities they built. And that pension money doesn't belong to the government, it belongs to all of you. And the Labour Party will never stop fighting until that money is back in your hands. And that is why we have to have Jeremy Corbyn in number 10. And that is why we need a Labour government. And that is why we have to get out there and fight for one. Thank you.
These won't cause some trouble, but they're lovely. That's a joke.
Come on, Germany!
Right. I'd like to introduce the young miner from Derbyshire, who's been here a few times. How up, Dennis? This is your life.
I went in the pits in 1949.
It was the miners that had left behind to speak for them in Parliament.
I still refer to him as Dodgy Dave.
By the time I was 4, 5 or 6, I was picking up the picture.
And I've run an 80-odd rally.
And I have been in jail and all the rest of it. And I'm proud to have fought every single day. I'd love to do it again.
I'm here to represent the working class. And will never give in. Never, ever give in.
Wow! How many times has it spoken of the Gala, Dennis? Can you remember? I think it's about 12. Well, we'd like to accept Dennis's painting by our local artist, Karen Thompson. It's an appreciation of lifetime commitment to Durham miners and socialism. I think it actually looks like you. We're so proud that you could be with us here today. We'd like to present you this first of all. This one. I think it's Vibration White Finger. It's good.
There you are, Dennis.
Do you think we should ask Dennis to say a few words? Bit louder? Come on, Dennis.
Right. Thanks. I know that the big meeting is changing. Why do I know? Because I've been stopped 300 times for selfies. What's happening to us? Now, the big meeting has been part of my life, because when I left school in 1949, I went down the pit. My father didn't think it was a good idea. I'd won a scholarship to grammar school and all that rubbish. And I went down the pit. But I've known ever since that everything that I've done in life has been a tribute to the miners in all the far-flung areas of Britain, because I've done every single rally that there could be, and I've enjoyed it all. And then they sent me to the Palace of Varieties. I had to beat a Labour man who'd left the Tory party. Does that sound familiar? And so I beat him on the ballot. He worked for the BBC, and he was part of the Roy Jenkins mob. Can you remember him? Roy Jenkins. He says, "I leave without wanker." I said, "I thought you were taking Marquand with you." So when the new General Secretary and his new team at Durham said to me a few months ago, "We want to make some money. We're going to show your film. It's called The Nature of the Beast." And the Guardian reporter said it was a tender portrait of Skinner. But we filled the hall up there. We made £3,000 for the Gala fund. And that's why they've got a roof over my head today. They've started spending it. but it's been a wonderful time. I first came up here in the early 1950s as a young raw miner, and then in 1978 I was selected to speak with a fella, do you remember him, called James Callaghan? Boy, he could twist and turn. And that's when I first came. I can't hear what you're saying. Somebody pass him a mic. I hope it's not one of those sea of angry faces that I meet in the House of Commons every time I stand up. Because that's what it's like. But when you come to the big meeting, you're talking to people who by and large have had the same kind of experience as yourself. And that's why it's important. I've listened to all the speeches here today, and I have to tell you, it's the finest team we've ever had at the big meeting in any year I've been here. We're not allowed to speak for very long, and they'll probably pull the plug on me. But I have to tell you, when I met those people down outside Parliament the other week, campaigning for a payout of the pension, I knew they were right. And that's why I'm pleased a couple of speakers have already referred to it. Jeremy, when you made a decision about education fees, you touched upon a very important strand. Millions of young people decided you were right. That's why you finished up at Glastonbury. That's why they sing songs about you. We want you to do something else now, and that is to take the government on with its miners' pension scheme money. They've already took £3.5 billion out of the funds. It has to stop, and we have to stop them. The Labour Party should make a statement in a short period following this meeting in which we make it clear that we're not going to allow the Tories to wait until every miner is dead and gone and they pocket the money. We do something now. And we have to make payments to the miners so that we can get something out of this deal. It all began under John Major, do you remember him? The man that had 7p's on his knife. I mean, it takes a clever businessman to do that. But he was the one that privatised, along with the rest of the Tory government, they privatised the coal industry. And the result was they took half of the money from the pension scheme as well. We have to put a stop to it, Jeremy. You have to imagine you're in the lobby with me. He always has been, he says. In the old days when we voted against the Libyan intervention and the Afghanistan war, and there were only 13 of us, and Jeremy was one of them. I knew that when he stood for the leadership of the Labour Party, he'd win with the masses of voters that were going to take part. A man after my own heart. I used to say to him in the lobby, why are you voting against the Afghanistan war? And it was always a very long-winded reason. It was typical Jeremy. He'd been brought up in a household where his father said, and he was a socialist, do you want to make a contribution, Jeremy? And my father said, who wait in the pit like me, shut your bloody mouth, it's not your turn yet. But we both finished in the same lobby. And that's important. You judge people by what they do in life and not what they say. And this man has been on the right side every single time. I was there when Wilson tried to wipe off the Labour Party debt. And Wilson was a clever man with 2 firsts at Oxford, but he couldn't write off the debt. And then along came Callaghan, and he'd been working for the Inland Revenue, and he couldn't pay off the debt. And all the time I sat on that executive and thought, will somebody come along and pay off the debt? Blair failed, Brown failed, and then Jeremy won the ballot. And the first thing he did was to get rid of the debt of the co-op. We've no longer got that £25 million hanging round our necks. He did it because of the 600,000 members that we had. Suddenly, we had the money to fight, and we had the money to pay back the co-op. That's how you judge him. If he can settle the Labour Party's debt, what on earth will he do with the country's debt? Think about it. It's like magic, isn't it? So I want him to start the process today, if he can, to deal with the miners' pension just like he did with student fees. We've got to capture those seats back that we lost in the mining areas. We have to make sure that the miners in Durham and Northumberland and all the rest of it, all those families that had people that work in the pits, we want them to join this happy band here today and vote Labour and get Jeremy into number 10. Even the opinion polls before I spoke give him a lead over tedious Teresa. I might get thrown out for that.
Get the cow back up!
But she is bloody boring, isn't she? Anyway, there are a lot of things to do and a manifesto to build. And today we've had speeches on this platform that have helped to build that manifesto for the future. And that's why I'm confident in the future that that man who stood with me in the lobbies might well be in another lobby soon. He'll be leading the party, but he'll be leading it to victory. We'll beat the Tories hands down. We'll beat the Liberal Democrats. We'll beat the Scottish Nationalists. All of them will fall before us. Give your support to Jeremy Corbyn. Thank you very much.
Dennis Skinner, ladies and gentlemen, we love him. He's part of our roots, part of our heritage, and he's someone who's promised to cherish our past and help us build our future. And he's been a Mara for many years. And that was him then. Here he is now. Let's have a roar for Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party!
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Durham. Thank you to everyone that's come here today. And I think we should always remember those that went before. We mourned those that had gone at the start of this afternoon's proceedings. And I particularly remember my old friend, Rodney Bickerstaff. But I never want to ever forget Davy Hopper and Davy Guy for all they did for the Durham miners for so many years. The way that they decided that the big meeting had to go on, that sense of togetherness had to go on, that sense of community had to go on, and that even with pits closed and gone, the spirit of the mining communities would never die and would never ever disappear. And this big meeting has always had an international theme to it. Today, we heard from Ibrahim of the cause of the Kurdish people and their demand for peace and justice in the world. And we hear that call from so many others, because their freedoms are our freedoms. Our internationalism is not about imposing nationalism on other people. It is about respecting the rights of people all over the world to live in decency, freedom, and enjoy the human rights that we've won for ourselves in this country. And I have to say, there is a degree of celebration going on a bit south of where Donald Trump comes from. I think we should congratulate the people of Mexico on electing Andrés Manuel López Obrador as the president. And I particularly thank Len McCluskey and Unite for the support they gave over many years to the mine workers of Mexico, including when their leadership of Napoleon Gomez had to live in exile, and the union supported them. That's practical, international, real solidarity in action, which is what we are made of and what we are proud of. But this meeting is a message about power. The power of people. The power of hope. And above all, the power of the unity of our movement across national borders to bring about social justice and change in the way that Bernie Sanders explained in the video message that he sent us earlier today. This meeting goes on because people support it. And we've got here something Lara's going to hold up. There. This was left for me last night when I arrived. No, not that bit, the other bit. Anyway. This bit. Support the Maris, support the campaign, support this festival, because it needs to go on forever. Because it is about celebrating our past, yes, of course it is, but it's also about where we go forward to in the future. This is the 150th anniversary of the foundation of the TUC. It is a very important historical moment to celebrate. I'm old enough to remember the centenary celebrations in 1968 of the TUC. We're now on the 150th. But the foundation of the TUC was a coming together of a lot of very different traditions of the labour movement. A tradition of skilled unions, of craft unions, derived from the guilds of the past, bringing together with the general unions of workers all over the country, and it was the unity that brought them all together. And what's different about the Labour Party from many others is that the Labour Party some years later was created by the trade unions, whereas other parties around the world have created unions in their own image. I'm proud to lead a party that's founded by the trade unions, supported by trade unions, and I am proud to be a trade unionist leading the Labour Party. It's also the centenary of the Fire Brigades Union. You heard from Matt Wrack earlier, and no one will ever forget the speech he made here last year, just after Grenfell. I was on the Grenfell March, the silent march, on the 1 year on from that terrible night and that terrible fire. Awful, awful experience for everybody. The power of a silent march around the streets, recognising that human solidarity with people and that incredible support given by firefighters, ambulance workers, police, volunteers and so many others to help people in their most desperate hours of need, and continuing the psychological and community support that's so necessary. Imagine a child where every member of your family died in that fire and only you survived. Imagine that sense of loneliness that so many people are facing a year on. And imagine the firefighters, through the public inquiry, having to relive those moments. But I agree absolutely with what Francis said. The culpability and the guilt surrounding Grenfell are those that put dangerous materials on buildings, those that didn't care about poor working class communities, those that want to deregulate our health and safety in this country. And it beggars belief that in the country's richest borough, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, there is the greatest gap between the richest and the poorest of any part of the country. In Golborne Ward, in the north of the borough, it is one of the poorest places in the whole of Britain. Not far south, 15 minutes away, there are people of unbelievable levels of wealth. I simply say this: Kensington, you should be ashamed of yourselves in not rehousing all of those people in 1 year on. And I would also say gently, well maybe not so gently, to those very wealthy people living in some parts of Kensington and Chelsea, and indeed in other parts of this country. A Labour government is coming into office, a Labour government dedicated to reducing inequality, a Labour government that will increase corporate taxation and taxation of the very richest in order to pay for the services that the rest of the community absolutely need. But it's a Labour government that is going to do so much more in so many ways. We glory in our National Health Service, and rightly so. The legacy of the next Labour government will be a National Education Service, because the principle behind it is we take the commodity out of education and replace it with the right to education and the right to know. The right for every young person to study a craft, an apprenticeship, a degree of equal value and equal importance. A nation needs engineers, a nation needs electricians, a nation needs gas fitters, a nation needs teachers, nurses, and so much else. When young people don't get the education they need and deserve, they lose, we all lose. Let's invest in our future, invest in our young people. But also help our young people in school and college and university understand where we come from, understand where our rights have come from. Nobody gave the right to vote to people. Nobody gave women the right to vote. Nobody gave the right not to be discriminated against. All those rights were won by popular action, by people, by trade unions and political parties coming together and demanding them as a way of gaining their freedom and their liberation. And so I would like our schools in future to teach the history of the Labour movement. I don't want to go into a school, speak to A-level students who are ever so polite and put their hand up and say, "Excuse me, Mr. Corbyn, what's a trade union?" I want them to know that. because they will have learnt it in school. The struggle of those who combined together under that tree in Tolpuddle in the beginning of the 19th century, in mining communities all over the country, because they knew full well workers combined together in a trade union are much stronger than individuals being picked off by an employer and split apart. It's not a complicated concept. And so I want our children to understand that and the contribution trade unions have made to safety at the workplace, to wages, to conditions, to international solidarity, and so much more, because they are part and parcel of our lives and of our national story. But a Labour government will deliver on education, and I'm determined we will deliver on housing. I do not want to live in a country that tolerates people sleeping rough on the streets while the mega rich keep their homes empty as investment opportunities for the future. I want us to invest in decent housing for the future, and I'm determined that a Labour government will do that. We will build council housing with lifetime tenancies on social rent. The post-war Labour government achieved much of that. It's got to be done all over again. We've had 8 years of austerity. We've had too long when people look for all sorts of other clever solutions to the housing crisis. I don't know any solution to the housing crisis that doesn't begin and end with building good quality, sustainable council housing. And Aaron Bevan, who was the Minister of Health that brought in the National Health Service 70 years ago, was also the Minister for Housing. And we celebrated his achievements in Tredegar a few weeks ago. The town that brought us the National Health Service. The Tredegar Medical Aid Society was the forerunner of the National Health Service. But Nye recognised, as we all recognise, the NHS is wonderful and should be celebrated. It should not be diced up, sliced up, carved up or privatised. It is ours not to be sold off. But our health depends on many things. Our health is not just what the doctor can do for us, what the hospital can do for us. It's also the quality of the air we breathe, the quality of the house we live in, the stress we face at work, the stress young people are put through, and the mental health crisis that goes with it. Or often older people denied the social care that they deserved. I want our whole country to be in better health, therefore better paid, better housed, better educated, and better able to lead their lives to the fullest possible extent. But it's not just about that, it's the creative in everybody that is there. You saw the banners coming in, you see the incredible artwork on those banners, you hear the music and the creativity that goes with it in all those bands, the improvisation. You see all around the country young people doing their best on music, wanting somewhere to rehearse and so on, and young people wanting to act, wanting to make films, wanting to do all the creative things. I want to lead a government that says, great, we are a creative nation, we are creative and innovative people. Let's make sure, under Labour, every child in every school gets to learn a musical instrument. But it's also about the jobs and economy. Others have pointed out that over the past 8 years, poverty and inequality and injustice have increased in this country. Wages have been frozen for a very long time. Real wages are actually falling for many people. There are almost 1 million on 0 hours contracts who don't know how much they're going to earn from one week to the other. And there are another 400,000 children living in poverty over the last 8 years. And as Dennis pointed out, that number will inexorably increase the longer these wretched Tories remain in office. It needs a Labour government to invest. And with the hand-holding with Donald Trump back in vogue again, I fear for a race to the bottom on our rights, our regulations, our justice and our work. We have won rights to holiday pay, to maternity leave, to paternity leave, to work in a safe environment, and the right to join a trade union. All weakened under the Tories. I want to lead a government that strengthens all of those rights and encourages people to come together and join a trade union. And to lead a government whose bottom line on negotiations over Brexit are defence of jobs, defence of living standards, defence of decency within our society, and trade, yes, that guarantees jobs. The alternative is what Boris Johnson, Liam Fox and many others offer, which is a hands-on trade deal with Donald Trump, which will bring you chlorinated chicken, GM foods, a race to the bottom, an end to all the regulations that we the Labour movement have won over very many decades. We're not giving up, we're not going away, we're going to fight for those jobs.